At this time, this part of the workshop is for Gratitude Changes Everything. This time I would like to introduce our second speaker, Kelsie. And with that, the floor is hers.
Hi, my name's Kelsie and I'm an addict.
Hey, Kelsie.
I like to project my voice a little bit because of our neighbor next door. So I did not have the gratitude I should have when I was asked to speak at 12:15, right? I was like, I would have a lot more gratitude at 12:15 in the afternoon. But the truth is, gratitude is something that's in the spirit and it can't really be taken from me. I do try and get in bed by 9, so this is late for me. This is so late. But, I just really was thinking, it's hard to be as grateful as I am today without remembering, what I have to compare it to. And I don't really talk about, the end for me that much. Usually on my anniversary, I touch on it. But, it was ugly, and it was dark. And I had been using for days, and I had my 5-year-old daughter in the back seat, and I can remember that day she was saying that she was hungry. I couldn't scrape together 49 cents for a cheeseburger for this kid, because I could not stop. At the end, the concept of using against my will, crying and using and getting more money together and crying and still using and using in a car with a small child and having that kid cry like my head hurts, and you don't know if it hurts because you're using with the windows rolled up or because you haven't fed her, but that was what my life looked like at the end. And my last night involved a high-speed car chase and my windows getting broke out and my daughter screaming in the back seat and me making it out of that situation with a rock in my hand and finally knowing I was safe and smoking, right? I couldn't stop. But that was the last one. And I remember she fell asleep in the back seat, surrounded by broken glass. And I was crying, and I just couldn't find a place where there was, I could see that it was the end. And I remember this prayer, and it was short, and it just was God, help me. And I could barely get those words out. And I always laugh because I bartended for a lot of years, and I bartended in a bar where there were a lot of cops, so I knew a lot of cops, and they always they didn't pull me over when they knew I was drinking. I had this good, and I called somebody I knew on the force because I didn't have anybody left. There was no parents to ask to come and get me. There were no friends left. I had been running for a few days. I couldn't call the husband. There was just nobody left. And I called the police station. Who calls the cops on themselves, right? The level of desperation. And I asked for this particular person. And I remember they put me through to him. And he's just, I'll meet you at the station. I said, I can't come there. I need you to come here. And he came to where I was at. And he hadn't seen me in months. And he's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm using, and I can't stop, and I don't know what to do, and I don't have anybody left to help me. And I remember that, he had me leave my car there, and he put me and my daughter in the back of his car, and he drove me to my parents' house, and he gave my daughter to my father as my father screamed. I don't remember what he said, but my father was this good, upstanding Christian man who lived what he said and said how he lived, right? He was everything he was supposed to be, and the things he said about me that night did not align with the person he was. I brought out everything ugly in him. But I can't imagine what it's like to watch your child killing yourself. If my daughter came to my house in the condition I was in that night with my grandchild, she'd probably hear a lot worse than I did that night. I can't imagine. I've never been in that place. And that night, I went to the hospital, and through a series of events, I had never heard of Narcotics Anonymous. But the next day, I ended up trying to go to an outpatient treatment, and they couldn't take me, and I refused to leave the front office. I said, I've got $10. I had like the crumpled bill, like in Pretty Woman when she's like, just take my money. And I said, I can't leave. If I leave with this $10, it starts all over again for me, right? It would start all over. And I remember they sent a guy out to like help me, and he gave me a meeting list and said, like, we can't do an intake, but like there's a meeting starting in 15 minutes. It's right around the corner. And I went to that meeting that day, and I remember the tables were in a square, and I went in and I sat down and I didn't talk to anybody. And I remember hearing people talking. I don't remember anybody talking to me when I first got there. And they started reading the readings, and I had one in front of me, and maybe I didn't have one in front of me. It's been a long time. But it was, who's an addict, right? And I remember watching the tears drop on the table as they read this piece of paper of identification. Who's an addict? Like a man or woman whose life is controlled by drugs. And I was hearing words I had never heard before, and they were resonating with me, and I was crying. And I remember I hadn't been sleeping. I was dirty. I had been out. I remember sitting in the meeting, like picking dried blood in my hair, because when my window got busted out, it cut my head. And all I could feel was this feeling of belonging, right? Like people say you probably don't remember anything about your first meeting. Our literature talks about you may not remember anything about your first meeting. I remember most of it. Maybe not all the details, but the way that I felt. And looking back, the gratitude I have for where God placed me that day at that time changed everything. That 1 hour and a half has changed the last 23 and a half years of my life. And I just remember crying, and I felt this hand on my shoulder, and I looked up, and they must have got to the part where they hugged the newcomer, and I didn't raise my hand that I was new, but it was obvious I was. And I stood up, and people hugged me, where in my real life, the real life I had just walked out of, it was like, you need to get the fuck out of here. Like, you need to go. Even the dealers were like, girl, get the fuck out of here, right? I couldn't go anywhere. Nobody fucking wanted me anymore. And like, I remember this loneliness that I felt every day. Like, it was a loneliness that you couldn't take from me. And it was like, it's hard to describe unless you've been there. And like, most of us have been there. And they just said, keep coming back, and they gave me this paper with other times to come back. And I couldn't wait to come back. I couldn't wait to come back. And it was a Tuesday afternoon recovery meeting. And I just remember I started going, and I was walking. I'm not sure why I was walking. I had a car. But I would go, and I didn't know anything about Narcotics Anonymous meeting. I didn't even understand that there were more meetings. This was the one I could walk to. I was going to 3 a week. I started taking my daughter, and therein lies like this new world that I entered into. And with that, everything began to change. And I got to jump over like some years, because I don't know how much gratitude I had early on. Like the speaker tonight, Jose, was that his name? Yeah, the main speaker, Jose. He made this comment when he was sharing, and he said, you have to look for it. And like, I have developed this ability to see like gratitude when it's in front of me. And like, you know, some time went by, and I think right around when I had about 5 years clean, things were happening, right? I came in, I lost my license pretty soon. No license. I had no license, no insurance, no papers, nothing. I get pulled over. They take my license for 4 years. I learned to depend on the fellowship. Gratitude for that today. 4 years, I needed other people to take me to meetings. For 4 years, I was dependent upon the fellowship. For 4 years, I built relationships that I still have today from people who brought me to meetings. And if you didn't figure it out, the girlfriend he talked about ended up being me. Not so grateful or proud of those moments, but it is what it is, right? He used to pick me up for meetings. So I develop all these relationships over the years, and my life gets better, and I get my license back, and I'm so grateful, and somebody in the program gives me a car, and it's a hoopty, and like I have to put plastic rims on it, and a box speaker in the back seat, and I put this bumper sticker on it I got at a convention. It was probably this convention, and it said cruising not using, and I started picking up addicts, and we went everywhere, right? Until I ran it in the back of an Atlantic electric truck. Totaled the car, shattered my leg, my ankle, my tib, my fib, which started this process. And I remember being in the hospital and people from Narcotics Anonymous coming to see me, and this was before Facebook. Nobody knew my last name. And they ended up calling from downstairs, they're like, listen, will you have all these people coming to see you? And I'm like, it's okay. If they don't know my last name, just send them up. If they know my first name, I know them all. And people came, and I can remember by this time I had redeveloped relationships with my family and my parents, and I can remember being so grateful, even in the hospital, that I had all these people. I imagined what would life look like if I was still using. Who would have come to see me, right? And I said, I had around 5 years, and I was starting to see things. I was looking for those moments. I was looking for the gratitude. And I remember asking the doctor if I would walk again, or if I would ever wear heels again. I said, doctor, will I ever wear heels again? Ha ha ha, because I always had this way of joking when I was really scared. And I remember him and his non-bedside manner having self, and he's like, we don't know if you'll walk again. And I remember thinking, I still have my foot. And if I can see it, you're not going to tell me I'm never going to walk. And that's how I left the hospital, was and I had surgery number 2 and surgery number 3. And the people from the fellowship showed up, right? They showed up, and fast forward, they were wrong. I did walk again. I mean, I got a little strut to me now, looks a little funny sometimes, but I walked, and during that process, I kind of reevaluated, I had been a waitress, I had been working on my feet, and I liked it. Listen, I was satisfied, I made good money, but what are you gonna do now, right? And they had this free bus that I could take to and from the adult education school, and I started doing that, and I started going back and forth, and I started taking classes because I had dropped out of school. And I remember by the time I did all my classes, I was driving again. And I know that because the day that I pulled up to take my test, I called my sponsor in the car, and I said, what if I don't pass? What if I don't pass all these months? What if I don't pass? And she goes, what if you don't? What if you don't? What's the worst that's going to happen? And I remember that was always the way that she talked to me. I'm so grateful for her. And this year, it'll be 20 years that I've been with her, and never have I even considered moving on in sponsorship. There is just this bond that we have. And I remember that day, and I went in and I took the test and I passed it. And I remember like the director of the school had come out and he's like, you're gonna walk, right? And I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna walk. I was older than everybody. You know, most of them were kids that had just dropped out that year before and they were getting their GEDs. And I'm like, nah, I'm older than everybody. And he's like, I would suggest that you walk. And I recognize those words, right? I recognize those words, I suggest. And I felt like that was the voice of God. And so he ended up telling me that day that if you were gonna walk, I had to write an essay about what brought me to adult education. And I'm gonna tell you, I didn't know how to use the computer we had at the house. I had to get my son to help write my essay because I could tell him, but I couldn't type yet, right? I didn't know how to use Word. I didn't know any of that. I had no need for it. And he typed out my essay. And I gave it to them. And I wrote my story, not worried who was going to see it. And I went ahead, and I remember I invited my parents to come watch me graduate from high school at 35 years old. And I had my daughter, I think she was about 8 at the time, 8, 9, 10, she was about 10 at the time. And an angel came, and they said they were going to announce their scholarship winner to the local college. But first they wanted to read an essay that they had written. And as they began to read it, I said, that girl's story's just like mine. And it probably took about 6, 8 sentences in until I realized they were reading my essay. And I remember thinking, like, this doesn't happen to people like me. Like, I'm not a winner. I don't win raffles. I don't win shit. And I won a full scholarship to college. And because of my circumstances, I was entered into this other program that paid for my computers, and I got a job at the college, and I can remember the gratitude. Like this, I had been like, what am I gonna do, right? What am I gonna do? So fast forward, like I do good in school, but I was burnt, right? Like I always, and when I talk about the gratitude, like I was a horrible student. Not only that, like I was a bully. You hate yourself, you hate others, right? I was a bully, and I did terrible, and I had this life in school that was like ugly and dark, and like I got to make amends. Like this was a 4-step amends. And I got to be there, and I took positions at the college where I gave tours to new students. Instead of like fucking tripping somebody, I'm giving tours, making sure they know that when they start school, where they're gonna go. And the gratitude for being able to like, we can never go back, but there are ways that we can make up for what we've done. And I went to school, and I graduated, and somebody nominated me for valedictorian, and I wrote another fucking essay, and I was a valedictorian that year. And I remember laughing, and I can watch the video that they took, and I laughed because as I looked out and they were clapping, like I remembered that girl who was driving around like smoking crack with my kid in the car, and I'm valedictorian a few years later and at the local college, right? It was the biggest deal for me. It was the biggest deal for me. And even if I jump back real quick, when I graduated from night school and from that adult education program, my 10-year-old daughter was in the audience clapping, and I heard her go, "Yay, Mom!" Like when they gave me that scholarship. And I remember thinking, if I knew they were going to give me a scholarship, I would have invited more people. And like, you know, I graduated from college, and you know, I didn't know what else to do. All I really knew at this point was recovery. So I did some classes, and I went into the treatment field like everybody does, and and I did that for a lot of years, and like my relationship progressed with him, and what I really wanted was to be a wife and to be a good one. See, I had been a wife, but I sucked, right? I was a bad wife. And I just wanted to like be a good wife, right? I wanted that life that I had just abandoned, right? And And I got that. I remember like we went to Puerto Rico for our honeymoon, and like we're talking about gratitude and seeing it. And I remember almost every night I would stand on the balcony as the sun set on the beach, and I would just cry. And I would get up in the morning and look at the sunrise, and I would cry. And that would not be the last time on vacation that happens, because I tend to do that everywhere I go. And you know, the gratitude for this life, right? And I got this whole other family. Like I got his family that embraced me and loved me, and his mother thought that I was an angel sent by God. I just want you to know she gave no credit to Narcotics Anonymous for him staying clean. I got all of that, which is, you know, I was like, oh, thank you. And you know, I struggled with my own daughter and our relationship, and you know, she was difficult, and she was difficult probably because, like, not only did she get the first 5.5 years of me using, but she got like the next 6 to 8 of me being so self-absorbed, because we come in here and we do work, and we do a lot of work, but that work entails us focusing on ourselves. I have to go to a meeting, I have to call a sponsor, I have to pick up the phone when somebody calls me. And yeah, we talk about the we, but that comes a lot later. At least it did for me. I was self-centered, I was self-absorbed, and everything I did was really for me. Eventually it benefited her, but it was for me, and there was so much I didn't do. There were so many times I didn't show up for her because I was too busy just showing up for me, and often for you, right? And that's time you can't get back. And I accept that, right? I don't beat myself up for that. But then my daughter has these 2 children, and my grandson just turned 2. And like, I never thought, people say it, you don't know what love is till you have grandkids, right? You hear it. This little boy is 2 years old. And when he goes to sleep at our house, I lay with him and I sing to him, and I always sing the same song. And I sing, "You Are My Sunshine." And this past week, we've been doing this for 2 years. And this past week, he was in a really good mood. He had been sick for a while, and this weekend he was feeling good. And he was tired, and I laid down with him, and he was looking at me, and I said, "We're going to sing, baby. Mama's going to sing to you." And I sang the first words of "You Are My Sunshine," and he just smiled and closed his eyes. Gratitude. I do not deserve to be loved the way he loves me. It is pure, and it is like, it feels undeserved. And I am so grateful that the God of my understanding saw fit to give me that kind of love. He has a sister. She still doesn't spend the night because she's not sleeping through the night. But I'm going to jump up and I'm going to tell you, like, it has not ended for me. And finding gratitude in the pain, right? 5 years ago. So I need to say that my parents were 2 of the healthiest people I knew. Not a pill between the both of them, except for a multivitamin, you know, and over 50 Centrum Silver for each of them in the morning. My dad started having some issues, and by the time they figured out what it was, he had a rare form of bladder cancer that has no cure rate at all. And he was given about 18 months to 2 years, and he died 18 months later. And me and my dad butted heads my whole life. And through Narcotics Anonymous and this program and change, I stopped expecting him to change for me. I remember thinking if he was the good Christian man he said he was, he would accept me for who I am. And then I realized years in that with the first step that God gave me, I was supposed to accept him for who he was and just allow him to be who he was. And like in the last 18 months of his life, it was me that took him to most of his appointments. And sometimes we would hold hands. And I remember he wanted to come home, and we were going to bring him home, but that last day he was in the hospital. I was holding his hand, and I remember, like, he was a man of faith, but he said, you know, honey, if God doesn't see fit to heal me, I sure am going to miss you. And I made a little joke, and I said, you know, Dad, where you're going, you're not going to miss me, but I sure am going to miss you. And he said, you're right. He said, but I want you to know that I'll be waiting for you. And as a person raised in his house with the same faith that he had, this peace came over me. And I was grateful that this program gave me a second chance with my father. And he died 5 days later. And I remember my mother had to leave the house for a couple hours. And he had stopped talking, and he had gone to sleep. He wasn't responsive anymore, and he had urinated on himself. And because my mother wasn't there, my sister and I bathed him. And I remember holding his head in my arm and thinking, what a gift. Like, what a gift. And he died later that day. And, you know, my mom never really got a chance to regain any kind of life because less than a year after he passed, she was also diagnosed with cancer. And we spent the next 2 years with her. And Narcotics Anonymous gave me the courage to live every day with her. And I say live it because we didn't treat her like she was dying. We treated her like she was alive. And we went to lunch and we went shopping and we did things. And I remember her last night, from the time she came home from the hospital, it was also 5 days till she passed. And that was a little different because there was no spouse, right? It was me and my 2 siblings. And I sat to her left and my sister to her right and my brother at her feet. And we held her as she took her last breath. And I remember thinking again, what a gift. And thank you for allowing me to be here. And it's hard to explain that feeling of being that joyful at a time that was so sorrowful. And I miss her every day. And I'm going to have to really wrap this up. But something happened. 2 weeks before she passed, I was laid off from my job in treatment after working in the field for almost 20 years. And then she passed. And then my adult daughter had moved home. And it felt like everything. I lost my mother, I lost my job, I lost my peace in my house because my daughter came pregnant with a 1-year-old and shit was crazy. And I told my husband I didn't know what I wanted to do and I didn't feel ready to go back to work. And months and months and months went by, and he's like, what you gonna do? And I said, I can't go back into treatment. I don't know why, I just can't. And I made the decision, and I took a few steps, and I decided I was gonna substitute teach. And I had never taught before, and I was dropped into a position for 12 weeks, into a 3rd grade class from the first day of school. I had 3 days to prepare to become a teacher. And because they'll just about let anybody substitute teach, I'll tell you that right now. And it was a 12-week gig, and by week 8 they made it clear they wanted to give me a full-time position in the school even when that part was done. And by that time I had made the decision that this was the shift, right? My spirit had shifted, and I always wanted more kids. And I got them, right? But to be a real teacher, I don't have the credentials. I got to go back to school. So this is where we are. I am 55 years old. I am back in college. I'm fast tracking with a psychology degree that'll get me to the place where I can get my CE to teach in the state of New Jersey. It might have been a midlife crisis, but instead of cheating and getting a fast car, I became an elementary school teacher. And every day I go in, and they have this position that I have to do in the morning, which is a hall monitor. I call it a greeter. I love what I'm doing. I stand at that hall and greet every kid in there like they're a member of Narcotics Anonymous. I hug them. I hug the ones that are crying. I try and hug the ones that shoot by me real fast. Sometimes I have a little candy in my pocket. Listen, grateful. God has given me yet another chance to see this different side of myself, to live all these different lives, and I don't deserve any of them. Like, I don't think I'm here because I did something that I deserve it. Grace. And I'm grateful for His grace. And that's all I have. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank the speakers for sharing their experience, strength, and hope.